Good morning, sir. Good morning to all. It's a pleasure and honor to have Mr. Rohit Bhagade amongst us. Mr. Rohit Bhagade is a highly successful financial professional with 18 plus years of diverse experience, incisive, analytical, leadership, and team skills. He has a proven track record of leadership, management ability, and expertise to deliver on time, efficient, and innovative solutions. He has an expertise in IFRS, US GAAP, Indian GAAP, accounting, FP&A, management reporting, deal structuring, pricing, contracting and risk assessment, credit risk analytics, financial modeling and budgeting, and forecasting. Sir is currently the Chief Financial Officer at SAP for Indian subcontinent, wherein he oversees the finance function for SAP India across the portfolio. His past associations include Cisco, Infosys, Bennett Coleman and Company, and Bombay Stock Exchange Limited. That was a brief introduction of Rohit, sir.
Thank you, Aishwarya. Thank you, Shripal, for this lovely introduction. Good morning, everyone. I know it is Sunday morning, and Sunday morning is typically a time wherein we would like to take an additional nap and relax a bit. First of all, I wanted to start by wishing everyone a happy Mother's Day. Here's wishing all the lovely mothers a fabulous Mother's Day. We are what we are because of them. Before I talk about the topic here, which is digitalization and its impact on finance function, I think what is very important for us is to acknowledge the current uncertainty that we have in front of us. The outbreak of COVID-19 has created a global health crisis that has a deep impact on the way we perceive our world and the way we live on a day-to-day basis. Indian economy at this point in time is definitely going through a lot of stress and strain as a result of COVID-19. There has been lockdown for the past 50 plus days, which has had significant impact on our GDP, both from a short-term perspective as well as from a medium-term perspective. India, if you really look at lockdown, roughly a quarter of our GDP is functional, which means the remaining 3/4 is not functional at the moment. Supply chain has been put under tremendous stress during lockdown. And we are seeing sectoral impact, especially sectors like aviation, travel, tourism, automotives, retail, real estates are significantly impacted as part of coronavirus. What my presentation is more from me as a finance professional rather than being the CFO of SAP India. Aishwarya, if you can go to the next slide, please. That's a quick introduction about my career so far. I think Aishwarya, you have covered it considerably. I will talk about some of the important stuff. I have actually moved from one sector to another sector. Every sector has its nuances. Every sector has its peculiarities, and hence that really helped me in terms of really enabling my experience and my journey. It has been a very rewarding one so far. In addition to the work-related stuff and qualification-related stuff, I can say that I am a big cricket, table tennis, and tennis fan. And I am for all the football lovers. I also track a team called Arsenal in English Premier League, and I have been tracking that team for the last 20 years. So you can just say I'm a very ardent Arsenal fan. Talking about cricket, which is a topic which is really near and dear to me. It's about a couple of months back, before IPL was scheduled to start, we had too much of cricket, and I heard everywhere that we are seeing so much of cricket, we should get a breather. Now, in the last 2 months, we have actually got a breather from cricket, and now I'm not sure about you guys, but I definitely miss cricket, not just watching cricket, but also playing cricket on a regular basis. Which brings me to an analogy that I want to talk about in terms of the impact of cricket and how it has impacted things from an innovation standpoint, and something that we can really learn. Now, as I said, the world is innovating, and innovation is happening all around us. Here is an example of innovation in cricket, and I wanted to tag that back to the current COVID-19 crisis and the role that finance has to play in terms of sustaining the growth amid this crisis. If you really see 1970s, that was a time wherein test cricket was the most popular type of cricket that we saw. It used to be 6 days earlier. After that, it became 5-day affair. And a 5-day cricket match was actually broken down into 3 sessions per day. So you had 15 sessions. And strategically speaking, every team had to win 8 to 9 sessions in order to win a test match. But again, test cricket was a slow-paced cricket that we all saw. In 80s and 90s, one-day cricket came into existence, and in fact, it gained immense popularity. The photo that you see there is one of the cricketers that I worship, and I really feel bad that that cricketer has retired now. Again, the game changed from a slow-paced game to a fast-paced game. And then in early 2000, we saw T20. And T20 is the fastest form of cricket that we see now. And again, every country, every player had to really adapt to really be successful in test match cricket, one-day cricket, and T20. Why am I saying this? If you really look at it from a corporate strategy or a country strategy standpoint, test cricket is like a long-term strategy wherein you have to really think long-term and ensure that you are sustainable and you grow not just top line but also grow profitably from a long-term standpoint. One-day cricket is more of a medium-term strategy wherein you have to not just look at short-term but also look at medium-term to ensure that you are heading in the right direction. At the same time, T20, if you really look at it, is short-term. And when I try to link it back to COVID-19, today, as a finance professional, we all have to play a T20 match on day one, a one-day cricket match on day two, and a test cricket match on day three. And then we'll have to keep flipping and flopping because you have to really look at things from a short-term, medium-term, and long-term standpoint. And that's where I feel the evolution of cricket is something that I can definitely relate to in these uncertain times. Which brings me to the next topic. I'm sure all of you would have heard about the term VUCA. For people who have not heard the term VUCA, VUCA stands for, V stands for volatility, U stands for uncertainty, C stands for complexity, and A stands for ambiguity. So we live in the VUCA world today. VUCA is as an acronym was used by American military, especially after the collapse of USSR in the early 90s. Again, the common point of view there was that we will not see a World War-like situation, but we will see a lot of uncertainty and volatility that will grip the global market. Talk about terrorist attacks, talk about dot-com bubble, talk about subprime crisis, talk about some of the countries going bust in the early 2010. There has been a lot of uncertainty and volatility around us. And then at the end of the day, for any country or any company, it is very important to really tackle VUCA. So if you could just go to the next slide, please. The important thing is managing VUCA. That's the number one priority that everyone has, whether it is a company, whether it's a country, whether it is the global economy. It's about managing the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, which is our number one priority. If you can just go to the next slide now. Now let's look at, before we talk about digitization or digitalization and its impact on finance function, I think what is very important is we need to also look at some of the macro trends which are emerging. And what the trends that I have are mainly long-term, which basically tells you a very important trend that we need to keep in mind while looking at the future. First slide, please. Again, this talks about top countries based on GDP. If you look at 1990s, 1990s was dominated by US, there was Japan, and then there was European superpowers, right? Again, bear in mind, you don't see countries like India, you don't see countries like China as part of this particular chart. So the market was all about US and Europe leading the market. Fast forward to 2000, the next slide, please. If you look at 2000, again, US continues to be the economic superpower. In 2000, their GDP was $10.3 trillion, but you saw China. China emerged as number 6 in the year 2000 from a GDP standpoint. Why did China do that? Because from 1990 to 2000, China became the factory of the world. lot of manufacturing outsourcing actually happened in China, which resulted in tremendous employment creation. At the same time, China was able to manufacture goods cheaper, as a result of which all the companies got benefited from the economies of scale. Fast forward to 2010. 2010, if you really look at it, China became the third largest economy from a GDP standpoint. US continued to be number one, Japan continued to be number two, but the gap between Japan and China is marginal. If you see there, in fact, it says 5,343 for China and 5,341 for Japan. So technically speaking, second and third economy was same in 2010. Again, Japan, while Japan struggled, China prospered big time, as a result of which you saw China capturing the market share in a big way. Again, here you don't see India. So till about 2010, we did not see India as part of the top 10 economies in the world, but we definitely saw China prospering and doing a phenomenal job. Now, if you look at 2019, and this data, by the way, will change based on GDP of 2020, and obviously COVID-19 is expected to have an impact. But if you really look at it from a 2019 standpoint, United States has a GDP of about 21 trillion dollars. China is definitely the second largest economy with $14 trillion GDP. Japan is now 5 trillion. If you really look at it from a 9-year standpoint, Japan has remained in the 5 to 5.3 trillion range, which does not indicate growth, by the way. India now is the 5th largest economy in the world with a GDP of close to 3 trillion. But we are also seeing some of the other countries coming up, countries like South Korea, countries like Australia, countries like Mexico, who are doing really, really well. And the future will be defined by how these countries perform and challenge the so-called economic superpower. If you go now back to the next slide, just like we saw top countries, it is also important to see how some of the top companies have fared in the last 20 years. Here is data from year 2000, wherein this is based on the market capitalization of the topmost companies. The largest company was Microsoft, but then you had a lot of non-IT companies in the top 10. If you really look at it in the year 2000, we had 7 companies from US, 2 companies from Japan. Both of these are telcos, and then you had Royal Dutch Shell, which was an oil and gas manufacturer. Again, dominated by US, and we also saw China and Netherlands as part of this. If you now fast forward to 2010, this is where we saw China emerging big time. There were 3 to 4 companies from China, while US continued to have a presence in terms of ExxonMobil, Microsoft, Walmart, and Apple. Apple, by the way, the first entry into the top 10 happened somewhere in 2009, 2010, wherein Apple became really, really successful. But again, you could see China emerging, you could see Australia, BHP Billiton, you could see Brazil, Petrobras, coming up. But again, out of the 10 companies which were there in 2010, there were 7 new entrants. Basically, it tells you a story. The story is innovation is key. If you don't innovate, someone else will, and someone else will capture the market share. Fast forward to 2015. If you really look at it here, again, the US economy really did amazingly well from 2010 to 2015. And again, bulk of the top 10 companies were from United States. But now there was a trend that was emerging. Apple became the largest company from a market capitalization standpoint. Microsoft, number 3. Berkshire Hathaway, which is an investment company, was number 4. Google, which was not even there in 2010, it was among the top 5 companies from a market capitalization standpoint. A lot of traditional industries started going down, which means technology companies actually had an upper hand versus some of the traditional industries. Now, if you fast forward that to 2019, in 2019, if you look at the top 4, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Google, and then you see a Facebook there. Then you see Tencent there, you see Alibaba there. That tells you a story. The story is technology companies are ruling the roost in the current market. Again, what are these companies doing? These companies are looking at transforming the entire landscape of the way we work, we live, we play. There are companies which are hyperscalers. We have become hyperscalers. Microsoft has an Azure cloud. Amazon has AWS. Google has a Google cloud, right? So these companies are going beyond their traditional business to really capture the mind and imagination of all the other companies and are doing exceedingly well. We also see Tencent and Alibaba. Tencent, I'm not sure whether you guys know about it. Tencent is again a Chinese company. It's a WhatsApp equivalent called as WeChat, right? And they have been phenomenally successful in China in terms of really penetrating the social media, and have done a phenomenal job in terms of really growing from $0 in 2010 to about 35 billion in 2017, 2018. Alibaba, again, it was not there in 2015, and now it is among the top 10. As you see more and more traditional companies go down, you see more and more technology companies doing really well. And what they are doing basically is breaking the silos and innovating and coming up with new business models. Next slide, please. If you look at this particular slide, and I really like this quote here, right, which basically says that if we don't change at all, what would happen, right? And there is this terminology called "don't get Kodak." Don't get Kodak basically means there was a company, Kodak, which was a leader, but they did not move to the digital part of photography because they thought that if they go to digital, their existing market will be cannibalized. And you know what happened after that? The company became bankrupt in 3 to 4 years. So it is very important that we look at innovation not just as something that we need to do, but innovation is key to the success and survival of any country, any company, anyone so that matter. And we can actually relate it back to the work that we do on a day-to-day basis. If you don't innovate, if you don't learn, then there's a possibility that you will be Kodak. So something that we need to be very, very careful about. Next slide, please. There was this very interesting study done in terms of technology disruption or the disruption in the market, and what really is happening in that particular space. So what that study says is roughly 4 out of 10 market incumbents feel that they will be displaced. So the companies which are top today may not remain at the top in the future, number one. Number two, the time for disruption is just 3 years. Between 2017 and 2020, there would be companies which got completely disrupted because of technological evolution. So time to market or time to significant disruption is just 3 years now. And 41% of the companies actually view disruption as existential threat. So again, to my point that innovation is the key. If you don't innovate, someone else will, and someone else will grab the market share, something that we all need to be extremely careful about. And when we look at our businesses, when we look at the businesses that we manage, we also look at not just the current competition, but the future competition. Who is there to disrupt us, and what are we doing about it in terms of countering them and continuing to grow as a company or as a corporation? Next slide, please. Now that we spoke about macroeconomic trends, we spoke about the fact that innovation is key, we spoke about digital disruption having a huge impact on the global economy, and some companies will have existential threat as a result of this. Some companies will really prosper as a result of this. Let's talk about digitalization in India. Again, a topic wherein I would like to give you certain very simple examples which talks about how India has digitalized in the last 10 odd years. Next slide, please. If you really look at it, let me start with the example, a very simple example. I'm sure the audience here is mostly finance professionals, either people who have a job or people who are studying and want to have a job or want to start something on their own. The first example that I wanted to give you is on income tax filing or processing. It's a very simple example, but which basically tells you how things change. In the year 2008, 2009, government came up with an RFP wherein they wanted to outsource processing of income tax returns. I was privileged enough to be working on that RFP, and one of my ex-employers and actually went on to win that RFP. Now, what was the entire processing of income tax returns all about? Number one, in 2008, 2009, 80 to 90% of the returns were filed physically, which means you have to physically file a return, physically fill in the entire fields, go to the income tax office. Either you can do yourself or ask your chartered accountant to do that and file the return. There used to be a form called as Saral, and I always thought that Saral was not that Saral, right? But anyways, so the summary is 90% of the returns were physical and only 10% were electronic. At that point in time, government wanted to really outsource the entire processing of income tax returns. And again, it had a very significant impact. Number one, the corruption would go down as a result of this. Number one. Number two, faster processing of returns. Number three is transparency to the assessee. Today, I can go to an income tax website and really figure out what is the status of my return and whether I'm going to get refund and all that stuff. Today, 100% of the returns, nearly 100% of the returns are all electronic. I feel it's a really great example of digitalization, wherein we have moved from a physical record to a digital record, and the entire country has got transformed as a result of that. So that's the first example that I wanted to give. Second one is connected education. The very fact that I'm having this webinar with you guys, by the way, it's a privilege talking to all of you, wherein I'm giving you my perspective in terms of what's happening, is connected education. I mean, there are platforms such as WebEx, Microsoft Teams, and Zoom, which were probably unheard of 4 or 5 years back, and now they are part of our lives. Our day starts with connecting to one of these platforms, and the day ends after being connected to the platform for the entire day. So connected education has really, really transformed us, and I feel it will continue to transform. When I was doing my CA, as an example, when I had any doubt, it used to be really difficult to get that doubt clarified, because while Google was there, it had just started. Again, getting that information was not very easy. And always you had to go back to your professor and ask if you had to get your doubts clarified. Now, if you look at it now, if you are a student and if you want to know about any new emerging trend, or if you have any doubt in terms of your curriculum, you can just Google it, go to a YouTube, etc. And you know what? You are going to get an answer. So connected education is going to play, is something which is really evolving, and I think that is having a significant impact. Now, I just feel from an India perspective, our education is still very theoretical. And there is a need for us to really revamp our education system to make it much more practical and much more result oriented. But again, topic for some other time. Connected healthcare. We are talking about hospitals focusing on telemedicine, remote diagnostics, etc. Again, these were unheard of 10 years back, but now all the doctors and the hospitals are working on connected healthcare, which is really impacting the way they treat the patients, and the overall healthcare experience has really evolved as a result of that. Connected manufacturing or mining. I just wanted to give here an example of mining. During my articleship days, I had the privilege of auditing one of the mines, and I was there for about 2 months. We were supposed to look at the end-to-end process in terms of what happens in a mine, and as a result of which, what is the impact on the P&L or on the financials. And if you really look at it in early 2000 or late 90s, things were so manual that by the time the mine would finish the finished product, the throughput or the productivity will be suboptimal. So we saw a lot of mines being in losses, and because of these manual process, there were frauds happening. There were a lot of inefficiencies in the system, which had a significant impact on the bottom line of a company or a mine. Now, if you really look at it now, people are talking about connected mines. People are talking about surveillance. There is a very clear dashboard that is created in terms of how things are moving from location A to location B to location C. There is technology being used to ensure that the measures on safety and security are taken care of. So again, connected mining is, at the end of the day, is resulting in higher productivity of the mine, higher throughput of the mine. At the end of the day, that results in higher top line and higher bottom line. So again, a classic example of how digitalization is really impacting towards profitability of some of these companies who are embracing this. Last but certainly not the least, smart cities. Government came up with really good initiative on smart cities. They announced more than 100 cities to be more or less smart cities. Again, going a little technical, smart cities also has multiple phases. What we are seeing now is only phase one, wherein the funding is mainly coming from the government. What is a smart city? A smart city is a situation wherein you have automated lighting, you have traffic management, you have got waste management, you have got centralized dashboard of what's really happening in a city, so that you can manage the city in a much more effective manner. That's a simple definition of what smart city is all about. The phase one of smart city is about government spending on the required infrastructure. But in phase two, government is also talking about a potential public-private partnership wherein the citizen services will be provided through the smart city platform, whether it is your marriage registration certificate, whether it is your birth certificate, whether it's your death certificate. Everything will be provided through a platform which will really enhance the consumer experience, in this case the citizen experience. So we are looking at citizen services having a significant impact, and this impact is created because of digitalization. If you go to the next slide, please. I have given you a lot of examples of digitalization, and by the way, there are 1,000 more examples, right? But again, it is very important to really figure out uh, what is the future of finance in this age of digitalization. I must say that digitization is perhaps the most abused word, because a lot of people really don't understand digitization, the digitization journey, and what impact it has on various functions. But let me talk about the impact of digitalization on finance. I do understand that there are few questions, but I would like to just finish my presentation, finish with my flow, and I'll definitely keep a lot of time to hopefully answer the questions that you guys have. Next slide, please. Before we talk about future of finance, I think it is very important for us to really understand how does a typical finance organization look like. And by the way, this structure may be different in different companies. In some cases, CFO also has legal responsibility. So legal also comes as one of the areas or focus areas or functions that we talk about. But in general, a typical CFO has these organizations. The first one is accounting and operations. This is where the accountants are there. The entire processes such as procure to pay, order to cash, record to receipt, is all tracked as part of this particular function. There is a controllership function here as well, and obviously book closing, financial reporting, and all that stuff. So this is the first area or first function. The second one is treasury. You will realize that I have given a very different color for some of the functions, and I've given a generic color for the rest. Treasury is again a specialized function. What do? They manage treasury operations, forex risk management, banking operation, funding, etc., etc. So again, treasury very specialist and manages treasury operations. Corporate finance. Corporate finance again depends. Most of the listed companies have got corporate finance as a division. What do? Corporate FP&A. What is the budget or what is the affordability at a company level is something that this function manages. Corporate development finance. When I say corporate development, it can be mergers and acquisitions. It can be any joint ventures with anyone. And and finance organization is supposed to look at the viability of a particular joint venture or M&A and provide the recommendation. So again, very, very important function from a strategic point of view. And obviously in investor relations, if you are a listed company, you have to talk to the street, you have to talk to the investors, you have to talk to the shareholders, and this particular team does a phenomenal job of doing that. Taxation, again, a very specialized function, but a very important function, because all the taxation related matters, be it direct tax, indirect tax, tax planning, tax related strategy, is all looked at by taxation department. Then you have got GRC. GRC stands for governance, risks, and controls, which is basically audit. Again, the entire audit angle, the internal audit, the compliance, and all that stuff is managed by this particular function. Now, we are also seeing a lot of organizations having a dedicated function called as Finance Transformation Office. This particular office really defines the digital transformation journey of finance. And this office plays a very significant role in ensuring that the finance organization is transforming and is ahead of its times. Last but certainly not the least is business finance. Business finance are the folks who work with sales organization, who work with delivery organization, who work with product R&D organization, and they focus on business partnering. They focus on top line growth. They focus on growing profitability. They focus on top margins growing faster than revenue, and so on and so forth. So it's all about partnering with the business. It's all about FP&A, providing deep insights, providing actionable insights rather than just giving a set of reports. And also commercial finance, wherein deal reviews, what price to quote to what customer, are we really protecting our margins as a result of the pricing that we are giving to the customer? Is our pricing construct right? Are we structuring a deal in the right manner to make it win-win for us as well as for the customer and all that stuff? So again, business finance plays a significant role in not just the top line, but also the bottom line of any company. So this is typically how a finance organization looks like. You will have various versions of it depending on the company, but typically any finance organization will have these functions. Let's move to the next slide, please. So role of finance. Okay, just one more click, please. Now this is again an EY report, and I thought it is very, very useful for us in today's discussion. Now, if you really look at the way the role of finance, you can look at accounting skills, and then you can upgrade it to business skills, and a reactive way of working versus a proactive way of working. So this particular chart actually defines how we used to do it earlier and what is the business expectation today. So I would say earlier, and in some cases, in some companies even today, finance plays a role of a scorekeeper and a custodian, right? Finance plays a role of commentator and a business partner. Where do we want to go? We want to go into a more business partnering role, which is focused on value creation, which is focusing on being a business advisor and really integrating with the business. I feel finance is at the forefront. No other function has got the kind of visibility that the finance function has. Finance today, a CFO today is supposed to be a co-pilot with the CEO. Again, it's a very demanding responsibility. It's a very demanding role. And that's where it is very important for the finance function to up-level the conversation in order to make it a win-win for everyone. So it is very important for you guys to focus on business skills and being very proactive in terms of doing your work. That's the summary of this particular slide. Let's move to the next slide. So this is the question that is asked to me a lot of times. And to be really honest with you, a lot of answers are very high level. A lot of answers does not lack a case study. I will try and make it simple for you guys, and I will hopefully give you some examples of what you can do in terms of being successful as far as future of finance is concerned. The question that is there is the future of finance dependent on technology or people? I keep getting this question. Will robotics, will RPAs eliminate our jobs? Will we not have any jobs and technology will take care of everything? I just feel technology is there to help you. Technology is there to augment you. Technology is there to transform you. There are still people required to make decisions. So the jobs are not going to go away, but the way finance does the work is going to definitely transform in the next few years. Next slide, please. So we will talk about the key pillars of future of finance. There is a pillar focused on technology. Then there is pillar focused on people. Next slide, please. Let's talk about technology angle. So there is this one slide which talks about what are the 5 key technologies that we are seeing, which is transforming the finance function. Number 1 is advanced data analytics and forecasting. And a lot of times people ask me, hey, if I create a dashboard, is that advanced analytics? And the answer is no, it is just a faster way of reporting. If I create something which is real-time dashboard, is that advanced data analytics? The answer is no. You are just trying to give that information real-time, which is, by the way, a fantastic achievement. Don't get me wrong, but you are not really giving additional insights for a company to take course correction or take action based on that data. Again, advanced data analytics is basically ability to predict outcomes. If I have got a deal in my funnel, what is the probability of that deal closing this quarter? Can I back my viewpoint with some analytics which talks about, hey, this is what happened in the past, and hence the prediction in terms of what's going to happen in future is based on this. That's a really excellent analytics that I'm looking for. Ability to manage risk based on the data points that are available. Is there a risk profile assessment that I can do? Can I pinpoint areas wherein I potentially see risk? It may be a compliance risk. It may be a fraud related risk. It can be anything else. But can there be more predictable outcome to manage my risk in the real-time situation? Real-time decision making. Today, for example, when a deal comes to me for approval, I have 5 to 10 minutes to take a decision. I cannot sit on it for 3, 4 days, 5 days. So I need the relevant data points, be that of the customer, of the industry, of the price points that I'm giving, the discounts that I am giving, the margins that I'm making, impact on working capital, etc., etc. I need analytics to help me from a real-time decision-making standpoint. Very, very important. Again, the idea is to help in executing business strategy. Again, so first point is advanced data analytics. Second is process automation. We also call it as robotics process automation. What it does, it reduces cost, it improves consistency, improves quality, and process agility. So you would see areas, especially in accounting, wherein there are a lot of repeatable processes which can actually be completely automated using RPA. Third is cloud computing. Today, CFOs cannot afford to make investments wherein the scale is going to happen in the next 4 to 5 years. We want flexibility. That's where CFOs are also looking at solutions which give them, rather than making a capital investment or a capex, doing opex, flexibility to ramp, pay per use, disaster recovery with someone else. Again, cloud computing as a technology can be a very important technology if we have to convert an enterprise into an intelligent enterprise. Number 4 is artificial intelligence. Again, it is basically to improve strategic insights by analyzing unstructured data. So when I say data, people relate data to a spreadsheet. An Excel spreadsheet, as an example, is a classic case of data. But there is data which is in a video file. There is data in an audio file. There is data in other modes of medium or other modes of communication as well. How do you combine these data points to really come up with the patterns and really help the organization in terms of taking informed decisions as well as managing risks? So artificial intelligence, number 4, is a key technology that every company is looking at. The companies will be a little discreet about it because comparatively it is a new technology. And again, I would say this is more of work in progress. A lot of companies and a lot of consultants are trying to come up with their point of view on this one, but something that is going to be there very, very important from a future standpoint. And the 5th one is blockchain. Again, just like artificial intelligence, something that is evolving. The point of views are emerging as we speak, but a blockchain would really improve transparency and increase IT security, which is what we need in terms of making any organization much more agile. So in short, when I look at technology, these are the 5 technologies that every finance organization is looking at and are trying to implement as fast as possible. Let's move to the people angle. Just move to the next slide, please. So before I talk about people angle, right? Again, I'm just trying to simplify. By the way, this is from an E&Y report, which and this slide I really liked. If you look at the finance function today, you have got a CFO who looks at strategy, operations, and people. You have got business partners who are strategic advisors to the line of business. We saw the line on business finance. Here are the people who make that happen. You have got center of excellence. Again, specialist kind of roles into risk, financial planning, taxation, etc., etc. And then you have got finance factories. These are basically shared services centers. Some of the shared services centers are in-source, which means the company continues to have the people. But in case of MNCs, they have moved from a high-cost location to a medium-cost location or a low-cost location. In some cases, these shared services centers are actually outsourced to a third party or maybe one of the IT services organization. Again, the low value, high volume transaction processes, right? Again, this is how the organization looks like today. Let's go to the next slide, please. This talks about how the organization will look like tomorrow. It talks about what would be the role of senior finance executives, what would be the role of strategic business partners, that what will be the role of next generation center of excellence, and what would be the role of smart finance factories. So the 5 technologies that I spoke about would be actually implemented in each of these functions as we go. Again, this takes care of 3 things. Number one, this gives an organization strategic important insights which can be used for decision making. This really helps the organization in terms of optimizing the efficiency, in terms of productivity improvement. This helps the organization in terms of controlling the cost, because now the mantra is do more with less, or do do same with less, as the case may be. Right. So at the end of the day, it is very important for us to really understand that the tomorrow's finance function, wherein these 4 stakeholders are involved, will have to really transform and change the way they operate today. Right? Let's move to the next slide. So again, this is again a very common question that I am asked. So what do I do? Right? I'm just graduating, or I'm doing my CPA, or I'm doing my CA. I don't have a job. What do I do? What are the skill sets that I should learn? Or I am into a role for 8 to 10 years, and frankly speaking, I'm lost. I don't know what my future is. What do I do? I will give you certain high-level mantras that you need to focus on. Number one, you have to look beyond traditional financial analysis skills. There is a strong demand for data gurus, such as statisticians and data scientists. There are whole courses available on data science. I would really recommend people who really want to understand more about the future of finance from a advanced analytics standpoint, or from a artificial intelligence standpoint. That is something that would really add a skill set to your repertoire. Number two is, we are all looking at digital finance talent. Today, when I hire someone, the knowledge of accounting or basic taxation is a given. I don't even ask questions on that one. What I am looking for is, how is that particular person going to add value to my organization as I chart out my finance transformation strategy. So again, expertise in areas such as blockchain and AI will really help in terms of furthering your skill sets, broad basing your skill sets and all that stuff. Number three, the most important one is, how can finance be finance business partners? I also call it as frontline finance. So if you take the analogy of football, I'm not sure how many of you really track it, right? You have a goalkeeper, then you have a defense, then you have got midfield, and then you have got strikers, right? I just feel that business finance are strikers, right? But unless you have a strong goalkeeper, you have a strong defense, and you have a strong midfield, strikers are useless. So at the end of the day, it's all about the entire finance organization being really agile for the frontline finance to really score goals. But from a business partnering standpoint, you need to have really good influencing skills. You need to have really good communication skills. At the end of the day, I think the last point is the most important one, is the strong knowledge of business. A lot of times we give recommendation which is theoretical, which is something which cannot be implemented. At the end of the day, if you are part of any organization, you need to know completely about what are the products that the organization has, what is the solution that the organization offers, what is the service that organization offers, and how some of these products are helping out the end customers. Is this really solving end customers' problem? By implementing or by selling, are we really trying to solve customers' problem? What is customers' problem? And so on and so forth. Once you really understand your product and really understand what it does to the customer, I am sure your ability to provide actionable insights to sales, to R&D organization, to anyone else, a delivery organization, which will be much more profound. And at the end of the day, diverse workforce. India does not really do a great job in terms of diversity, but I just feel a diverse workforce gives everyone a very different perspective. There are newer ideas coming into the foray, and hence a diverse workforce, in my view, is the future of finance, and everyone should strive towards this. The last point that I would like to say is, what I am looking for is smart finance. S stands for someone who thinks strategically. M stands for someone who mines data and information for insights. A stands for analyzes and advises business partners. R stands for facilitates resource allocation, and T stands for grooms talent. I'll give you a very simple example of some of the stuff that I do on a day-to-day basis. I have got a lot of people in my earlier company and even in this company. They come up to me with really good insights in terms of the analytics that they have done. One thing that I do is I ask them, close your laptop. Close your laptop and now give me a 1-minute story in terms of what is your analysis and what are you recommending. So storytelling in terms of being able to tell your insights and your action points in a very crisp manner is very, very important for the future of finance. I am looking at people, for example, who can tell me a story that is clear. If they can tell me a story without the laptop in front of them, that means they know what's really happening. They know their numbers. They know what should be the road ahead. And I get convinced very easily if someone is able to tell me a story in a very articulate manner. Next slide, please. So if you really look at CFO's agenda, right? I mean, people say that because of technology, because of digitization, because of finance transformation, has the agenda of a CFO changed? And I would say no. Depending on the company, the agenda can be different, but any progressive finance organization, CFO agenda is very, very simple. Again, this comes from one of the E&Y reports, and I really liked this particular slide. Number one, provide insights and define drive growth strategy. As I said, CFO is a co-pilot along with the CEO. And it is very important for CFO to really understand the pulse of the business and drive the business forward. Improve operational efficiency. At the end of the day, doing more with less is here to stay, whether we like it or not. Manage and benefit from technology disruptions. I'm sure technologies like RPA, robotics, AI, blockchain is really going to help everyone either directly or indirectly. So it's very important that you manage this technology disruption well. Meet regulatory compliance and reporting standards. This is something which has been there since time immemorial, wherein finance is supposed to play the role of ensuring that from a compliance perspective, we are doing an amazing job. And manage and optimize binding constraints. So there are definitely constraints wherein you have to manage and you have to optimize. And the agenda then, if you move to the right-hand side, the expectation is that you use these technologies or hot topics in terms of helping you, in terms of driving your agenda. And we spoke about robotics, machine learning, cloud, AI, blockchain, digital, etc., etc. So again, the agenda per se has not changed. It is the same. How do you deliver that, the outcome, is obviously going to change with the technology disruption that we are seeing. Next slide, please. And perhaps this is my last slide. I spoke about VUCA. I spoke about volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And here is Rohit Bhagade's version in terms of what VUCA should be for us. VUCA should be V for vision, U for understanding, C for clarity, and A for agility. So how do you convert volatility into vision, uncertainty into understanding, complexity into clarity, and ambiguity into agility is something that we all should be looking at and we all should be driving from a long-term standpoint. With that, I think I have spent 50 minutes in terms of giving you guys my perspective of what is digitization, what are the trends and themes, and what is the impact on finance functions. Thank you for a patient hearing. I would definitely love to hear your questions and provide my perspective on the same. Shripal, over to you.
Thank you so much, Rohit. I mean, this is one of the best PPTs I have at least seen, and the best presentation the crowd might have seen in today's session. The way the point which were kept, and I think the summary I would say is finance is not just about building the numbers and all. It's more about partnering with business and understand this more from a tech perspective as well. So over to you, take up the questions. Somewhere we can, the participants can raise their hands and we can unmute those participants so they can talk to Rohit as well. So this is the first time we are doing this in the session. So Aishwarya, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, we have a first question from Saurabh. There is undoubtedly a paradigm shift in the manner businesses are being conducted today. As business partners, what are the key essential skills that would still remain viable despite technological disruptions?
Great question, Saurabh. I mean, I think I kind of covered it as part of my presentation, but let me give you a talk track in terms of what those skills are. When we say business partnering, some people feel that just having a full day call with the business stakeholders is business partnering. Some people feel that I need to be present in all the conversations that is happening with the business. As a finance function, you get a seat at the table when you are talking to any business stakeholders. That's a given. Now, the most important thing is how do you convert and earn that seat? In my view, the way to really figure out business partnering is number one, understanding the short term, medium term, and long term strategy of the company or of the unit that you are managing. We spoke about test match cricket, one day cricket, and T20. Always use that in parlance with the business. It's very important for you to really understand the strategy of your company. Now, whether it is a short-term strategy, medium-term strategy, long-term strategy, have clear metrics in place wherein you can track and measure the performance of the unit or the company. Number three, have that conversation on what according to you is going right and what according to you is going wrong. Don't just point at issues, but also talk about areas wherein you can work collaboratively with the business stakeholders to change the status quo. So understand the business, have effective communication, have a real clear analysis when you're talking to your business stakeholders, and have a clear outcome. That is very, very important for you to be a very effective business partner. In addition to that, talk about those skills, influencing skills, communication skills, and understanding the business. That is the mantra for you to be a successful business partner.
Is it obligatory for any finance person or a company to learn and adopt to IoT and allied technologies in order to persist?
Okay, IoT, again, Internet of Things, right? There are billions and trillions of devices which will be connected in future. So Internet of Things is here to stay. I would not say whether anything is obligatory in nature. I would just say that every company will be technologically disrupted in future. So whether it is for the company or whether it is for the finance function, it is very important to stay ahead of the curve and embrace the technology. So I would say while IoT, this by the way, word has been there for the last 10 years, we saw certain use cases, but in parts, but I just feel the next 10 years will be all about IoT. It is all going to be about digital revolution. And a company and a finance function has to be invested in terms of really figuring out what does that particular technology mean to the company, what does that technology mean to the role of finance, and how they can embrace that to go ahead. So that would be my answer.
What are the new technological opportunities you foresee for chartered accountants apart from the traditional ones?
So as I said, as chartered accountants, we are very good in terms of accounting. We are probably very decent in terms of taxation, right? And don't get me wrong, these skill sets are required. I spoke about shared services center. I spoke about center of excellence. These will continue, right? But more and more, you would see technological disruption in these functions. So the chartered accountant has to really up the ante and move towards more business partnering kind of skills, more business partnering kind of roles. So from that standpoint, there are functional skills, there are technical skills that you need to learn. Functional skills, you need to really figure out, as I said, the long-term vision and strategy of a company that you're working in. You need to really invest in terms of really understanding about your products, what the company offers, what are the positives, what is the competition doing, how is your company doing differently from the competition and all that stuff. Technical skills, if you really want to be part of this advanced analytics journey, I would recommend everyone to really figure out whether they have interest in newer things like data science, in terms of blockchain, in terms of taking up any course on artificial intelligence and all that stuff. There are opportunities available for chartered accountants to be functional consultants. So you can, for example, SAP has got a suite of products for intelligent enterprise. You would need people who have got functional expertise who can go and implement these solutions. So that is also an area that people can explore. from a future perspective. Again, I would like to step back and give you guys my perspective of what today happens in finance world. When we get a job, when most of us get a job, we feel that we want to do real high-end stuff. We feel accounting is anyone can do. It's a low-end stuff. We feel taxation is a low-end stuff. I just feel the career has to be shaped in such a way wherein you keep taking skill sets and putting them in your pocket, and as a result of which you gain in experience. So it is very important for anyone to look at the long-term view when you are shaping your career. I feel in any role for that matter, you have to do justice to that role by staying in that role for 2 years. A lot of us want to get promoted every year. And by the way, that's it's very human for us to think like that. I would just say, if you want to really look at your career from a long-term perspective, invest and spend time in a particular role or a particular function for at least 2 years plus, and then try to move from one role to another role. Don't be very open to do a lateral move. A lot of us want to just move via promotion. Everyone wants a double-digit salary hike. I'm sorry, those days are probably gone. It is very important for you to move laterally, gain skill sets, gain expertise, and then move up the curve. The moment you do a really good stint in accounting, really good stint in taxation, really good stint in audit, and then you move to business partnering, you will have the kind of skill sets that will stand out and will really make you a very successful business partner. But you also need to really understand whether you're doing accounting or auditing or taxation or business partnering, you need to have clarity of the business of the company that you are working for. You need to really understand what is the strategy of the company that you are working for. And that's where you can then add more in terms of partnering with the business. So focus on functional skills, focus on technical skills, but invest in yourself. Don't say that after 6 months, I'll move from one job to another job. It is very easy to do that, but you will lose out from a long-term standpoint.
While taking a decision, you would need to be selective in terms of what's helpful and what's not in terms of data supporting decision making. How do you do that in your day-to-day life?
As I said, sometimes in most of the times, we have to take a decision within a day or within half a day or within an hour, right? So again, I look at my finance team to be able to give me a recommendation. If someone who is doing deal review or deal structuring, and there is a decision I need to take, I will have a very clear and transparent conversation with my person in terms of what is his recommendation. At the end of the day, what are we recommending? Should we go ahead with a particular opportunity or a deal, or should we not? What is the impact of that? The impact of that can be on top line, can be on bottom line, can be on cash flows, can be on working capital, can be on long-term relationship as far as that particular opportunity is concerned. So I look at all these things before taking a decision.
Yes, sir. What are the tools for doing advanced analytics, and how cloud computing can leverage financial processes?
Yeah, so first let me talk about cloud computing, right? So as I said, cloud computing is nothing but you not having to invest in your own data centers and probably leveraging some of the offerings that a vendor has, which really helps you in your strategic objectives. Take an example of intelligent spend, and I'll give you an example of my current company. We have got a product called SAP Concur. We have got a product called as SAP Ariba. Concur is basically a travel and expense module, wherein it's all on an OPEX basis. You don't really have to spend anything from a CAPEX standpoint. You have to pay based on consumption. If you really look at the P&L of any non-manufacturing organization, the first line of expense from a size perspective is obviously salaries. And the second line, which is very highest from a exposure standpoint, is travel and expenses. So here is a offering that is there, which will really help you in terms of processing travel and experience in a very seamless manner. It gives an employee amazing user experience in terms of managing their own travels. It conducts self audit, and it gives you a very clear audit trail. It resolves the issues in terms of duplication of expenses and all that stuff, and also helps in making the organization compliant. And by the way, by doing all this, it also helps in terms of reducing the expenses that the employee that the company has on that line. So again, leveraging these cloud computing or intelligent enterprise tools is very, very important as you go to the future years, wherein everything is going to be very uncertain and volatile. That's number one. What was the first part of the question, by the way?
1 second, sir. Yeah. What are the tools for advanced analytics and how cloud computing can leverage financial processes?
So advanced analytics tools, again, a lot of companies are building their own internal tools, because every company is unique. And then obviously there are tools available. SAP also has got tools on advanced analytics and all that stuff. So again, at the end of the day, I don't really look at what tools I need, but what is the problem that I'm trying to solve. And if I have to solve a particular problem, we will look at what are the tools which are available in the market, what are the tools that we have developed in-house, and accordingly implement those. So again, it depends on where the organization is at, but there are multiple tools available in the market which can be leveraged for an organization to continue the digital transformation journey.
So we have Meeta, and I've unmuted her, and she can put forth her question.
Sure.
Yeah. Meeta? I guess 1 second. Yeah. Amrit?
Hi,
yeah.
hi Rohit. Good morning. I have worked with Oracle in the deal advisory role, especially in the cloud computing or the cloud team. My question is around SAP HANA. I read a report where it said that Oracle and SAP, which were traditionally a powerhouse when it comes to licensed softwares, have the maximum unused cloud storage. So, I mean, how are we, ensuring that the implementation is better, and considering, we are helping out the organizations better. I mean, the implementation of the cloud is better. I think that is where we face the major challenges.
Okay, so you're absolutely right. HANA has really transformed the industry in terms of its offering. I think your question is more in terms of either implementation getting delayed or extended for various reasons, and
yes,
and companies also having kind of a shelfware in terms of buying more than what they need, right? So again, it's all about if I may say so, when we look at implementation, either there is a third party involved in terms of an implementation partner, or obviously these implementations are done by the companies themselves. It is important for everyone to really look at what is the stated objective, why are we doing that implementation, and if there is any issue in terms of making a course correction, there has to be a joint discussion between the company and the implementation partner in terms of course correcting what is not going right and all that stuff. As far as shelfware is concerned, see, at the end of the day, a company also procures because they are expected to grow exponentially. So some of this shelfware actually is good because that really helps you in terms of scaling if you need more licenses in the future. But a lot of companies can look at using that shelfware and buying something else, and ensuring that they continue on their journey as far as digital transformation. So why are implementations taking time? I don't think I'm an expert in that particular field, but every implementation can be course corrected and every solution can be implemented in such a way that it is useful to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have our next question from Yogesh. Please go ahead. Yogesh?
Hello Rohit. Hello everyone. My question is about, as Rohit said, that there are some technical upgradation that we need to do, like this robotic process which he has explained. So I just want to know, are there any courses available or to gain further knowledge, and are there any way to develop skills? Thank you.
Okay, good. Good question, Yogesh. Thank you. So I can talk from an SAP perspective. SAP has something called as SAP Learning Hub. I would encourage all of you to go there. There are online courses available on the emerging trends and themes that I'm sure you can definitely leverage and use. And at the end of the day, just Google it. You will find multiple courses that are available on data science, on machine learning, on blockchain, etc., etc. So I would just encourage you to just explore and take any of these courses. Again, these will not, these are additional skill sets that you need. I am again focusing from a finance perspective. The most important thing now is partnering with the business. And unfortunately, that cannot be taught. That has to be experienced. But for other things, you should definitely add these skill sets to your repertoire in order to make you a 360-degree professional from an overall scheme of things. Hope that answers your question, Yogesh.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, next question from Akshay. Please go forth.
Hi Rohit, good morning. So thanks for this session. First of all, it took some of us back to our Infi days when we were having the DPS sessions taught by you. And my question is that, for example, I have done some basic courses on AI and RPA. But the thing that I do in my job currently does not have scope for implementing those things. I have implemented some of the systems which are not there, like DPS and Net Promoter Score and site survey digitization, etc. So even if we do the basic courses on digital tools, then how do we, on the job, how do we get the experience? So that is one doubt that I have.
Sure, Akshay. Again, good to hear from you, and thanks for reminding me of the good old Infosys days. I think more than how you implement it in your new organization, right? It again comes back to the skill sets that you are learning as you are going up the chain. As I said, it is very important for you to be in a role and understand the role completely. May take 2 years, may take 3 years, and as you move on. In my view, the long term, you have to decide what is your long-term objective. If you want to become a CFO of an organization, you have to acquire those skill sets and finally move towards a role which is more on business partnering, right? From a business, so that is number one. Number two is how do you implement these skill sets? The reality is you may not be able to implement this on your own, but it would require a mandate from your finance organization to really drastically transform itself from where it is today to where it wants to be. So it's more of tone from the top, message from the top. If you really look at the finance functions that I spoke about, I specifically spoke about a finance transformation office. In my view, that office is today very much required to ensure that every finance function is investing digitally, technologically, and is implementing some of those digital needs of the future. So it is very important for you to have those skill sets or certifications so that you will really understand the length and breadth of what it is. But as far as implementation is concerned, it is probably challenging for you in your limited influence to implement it on your own. It would require an organizational mandate.
Very true. Thanks.
Bindu, you can put forward your question.
Yes, thank you. So it was a great session. My question is an extension to the question that Yogesh asked. Like you said, like finance is now transformed from a traditional to a structured to an unstructured world. So it opens us to a world like accountants can be statisticians. So like, can you just speak more about it? Like we come to read about programs like learning programs like R programming, Python. So will learning those skills really help a finance person in climbing the ladder, or are we really going to be in competition with IT professionals? Will that skill set really be helpful, sir? If you can give an insight on that.
Sure. I'm sorry, I did not get your name.
My name is Bindu Gokila, sir.
Hey, hi, Bindu.
Actually, today I'm having a statistics exam in night.
Okay.
I have to take, but I'm waiting for your webinar so that I can hear that and then I can go for my exam. I'm from US.
Okay.
IST time here, it is 10:15 here. So 4 hours is our exam. So I thought I should not miss this session. It's a great session. Thank you. It was great.
Thanks, Bindu, and wish you all the best for your exam. I'm sure you'll rock.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So let's take a step back to your question, right? Let's take a step back.
Mhm.
So at the end of the day, the question that you should ask yourself is, what do you want to become? Okay.
Mhm.
And the reason why this question is very important is it can be anything. Your long-term future can be a tax expert. Your
Mhm.
long-term future can be a CFO of an organization. Your
Mhm.
long-term future can be a treasurer. Your long-term future can be a chief risk officer of a company. Your
Mhm.
long-term future can be a functional consultant who is a kick-ass in
Mhm.
his or her domain. So
Mhm.
the answer in terms of whether that course or whether that certification is really going to add value to you would come based on you answering question in terms of what do you want to become. If you want to become a data guru, then obviously a course on data science or Python or machine learning will be something that you have to do. And you have the unique ability to convert a technical expertise into a financial or domain expertise, which by the way, none of the IT guys will have, right?
That is true, sir. That is
Right?
really true.
Now, number one. But if you want to become a tax expert, I mean, I would not do a course on machine learning if I'm a tax expert, unless I want to use data science in my
Mhm.
field as a tax expert in terms of really assessing, harnessing data and coming up with the outcome based on that. If I want to become a CFO, I would definitely want to understand what's happening in the world of data science. But probably
Mhm.
I'll do a basic level certification to equip myself and not go beyond that. So again, at the end of the day, Bindu, it is all about what do you want to do in future? What do you want to become? And
Mhm.
doing these courses is probably an outcome of what you are going to answer.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir. That really inspires. And it was really a great session. I would like to thank you. And I like also to thank Simbander Education for the great opportunity that's given to our students. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Wish you all the best.
Thank you.
I think Sriram can go ahead. Sriram.
Morning, Mr. Rohit. Am I audible?
Yes, Sriram, go ahead.
So regarding with the session here today, given a glimpse about the modern role of finances, I'm very much inspired to learn much more the upcoming sessions, and thanks for similar education as well. And my question is regarding with the bitcoins, the cryptocurrencies which are about to enter the Indian space, we are stepping back. The reason being it is not coming under the control of RBR or like other like cloud computing or data sharing, which are being not limited by boundaries. So, what may be the primary reason the cryptocurrencies or what are the things blocking us to adopt it or go ahead further? Since we are moving towards like, traditional to modern approach like QR code scanning or like wireless transactions. So, what is the thing you are trying to look at this prospect?
So thanks, Sriram, for asking. I must say, I am not an expert as far as cryptocurrency or Bitcoin is concerned. So my answer may not be really that convincing for you. But I just feel there are a lot of, not just Bitcoins, but there are a lot of cryptocurrencies which are floating around. There have been cryptocurrencies which have been successful and currencies which have not been successful. So I would just say it is not a proven science at this point in time. And for anything to be adopted, it has to be adopted globally, not just by few countries. So I think probably that's the hindrance. But as I said, I am not definitely not an expert in cryptocurrency. But based on my limited understanding, this is what I feel.
Okay, well, the reason I asked this question was is like since we are moving towards like much and more digitalization, as you told, like artificial intelligence, RPAs. So we should be a very good scope and expanding our technical skills. That's why I was asking posting this question to you. Anyway, thank you so much.
I would recommend you to focus more on the other technical skills, which I just talked about, which is artificial intelligence, machine learning, analytics, and improving the soft skills part of it, which is communication skills, influencing skills, business partnering skills. I think those would be much more relevant rather than just looking at cryptocurrency as a topic. That would be my recommendation.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sriram.
Before moving ahead, I would request everyone who have asked their questions to please put their hands down so that only those people are entertained who are having their questions. Like, yeah, we can move ahead with Amit. Please move. You can put forth your questions, Amit.
Yeah. Hi, Rohit. Great session today. So, business transformation and digitization is the new normal for, I would say, every businesses. And roles like corporate planning and business finance, they can benefit from it greatly. But there's like a lot of tools floating around, a lot of jargons floating around. So I feel these guys need to declutter and select and be selective in terms of using the job options to help the business and decision making. Now, SAP being a company who's so into digitization and this transformation stuff, I'm sure you would have seen practical examples while looking at your team transitioning from old model to this new model. Can you share some examples wherein some of the options used really helped in providing the strategic insights?
Sure. So I do have 2 or 3 practical examples that I can talk about. Number one is SAP as a company has looked at really having finance transformation by having shared services centers and COEs, so that we can look at expertise in that area, and rest of the finance function can focus on business partnering. So we have already ventured into that. Number one is, as I said, when we say we are in a VUCA world, you look at what really happened in the last 50 days. I'm sure all the companies were able to close their books virtually. So you did not have to be physically present in one location. You were able to close books. You were able to declare results. You were you were able to announce those results to the street, have a conversation with the stakeholders, be it investors, be it analysts, etc., etc. So how is this happening? This is happening because the technology, the underlying technology, is really transforming and helping us in terms of doing all these activities. And 70% of the global companies use SAP. So another example of how SAP is able to really ensure that the virtual book close and all that stuff is happening. The third one is in terms of how is SAP leveraging some of these technologies. So SAP is looking at things like RPA. There are few RPAs or bots who are already where we have already implemented it, and we are seeing some of these repeatable processes being done by bots, and we have been extremely successful in terms of doing that. That's the third example. Fourth is in terms of, as I said, intelligent enterprise, wherein we are focusing on, and we do have solutions for our customers. And when we say we do have solution for our customers, we are internally using those solutions like SAP Concur, SAP Ariba, wherein we are looking at leveraging some of these solutions for internal work. For example, travel and expenses, we are completely using SAP Concur, and that has huge benefit to the business, to the transparency, to the audit trail, to ensuring that there are no duplicate claims, to ensuring that most of the claims are digital in nature, to also ensuring that we are able to process claims 80% faster, to also ensuring that there is a great employee experience. So SAP as a company is using and leveraging all its technologies internally, and is also providing these technologies to the customers in order to make it a great user experience. As I said, last but certainly not least, artificial intelligence or analytics is an ever evolving industry. There are a lot of internal conversations happening in terms of what's the future roadmap from an AI perspective, from a automation standpoint, which every company is doing as they go along. But I'm sure you got the answer that you were looking for. There are certain live use cases that we look at from an SAP perspective, which we have been able to do.
Sure. Thank you. Right.
Sanuj, you can go forward.
Hi Rohit, good morning. First, I would really thank you and Shripal for this wonderful session. And thanks Rohit for sharing examples on cricket and football, which we can relate. My question is, now the whole accounting profession continues to be disrupted with the new technologies and the automation. So how does the audit function undergo these changes, and how can it become outcome driven?
Sure. So again, talking about audit function, right? The example that I gave of SAP Concur, for if you look at non-manufacturing companies, the second most line is travel and expenses. The audit team can actually leverage the analytics that are embedded in, for example, SAP Concur, to really figure out what are those corner cases that you need to look at. Audit is basis on sampling, right? And because of technology, the concept of sampling is going away. You are practically looking at 100% audit, and technology is really helping the audit function in terms of being able to audit majority of the transactions and not just the sample transactions. So my recommendation to you would be, see how data and analytics on the data can really help you in terms of focusing on the areas which are concerning or pain points at this point in time. Earlier, when I used to do audit, that was probably 20 years back, when we go for an audit assignment, it would take us 20-25 days to really come up with the specific areas that we need to deep dive upon. Today, that can be done on day one because you have got all the data points and trends and themes which are available with you. And that's the benefit of having the technology or the data with you, which can be leveraged. So again, you can broad-base your audit experience based on this, number one. Number two is you can actually practically use these tools and technologies as you complete your audit, whether it's an internal audit or any compliance-related audit.
Thanks, Rahul.
Yeah, Vivek, I have unmute you. You can unmute yourself from your side if you want to ask the question.
Or else I think we can take Shweta Verma's question. Shweta, can you go ahead?
Sir, yeah.
I think there is some disturbance from there. Shweta, Shweta?
Shweta, we have unmute you. You can speak.
Maybe she can type in her question, Shripal, if that's okay.
Yeah, that would be good. Aishwarya, can you take up the questions of Ankit Sangvi? I'm just putting up Rohit. So what are your thoughts for Indian tax technology? Are companies looking for solution? If yes, then what exactly companies are looking in indirect taxation side? For example, GST?
Okay, just like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, I don't consider myself as an expert on the taxation side, especially on the indirect tax side. So I will duck that bouncer and will say that there definitely are experts that we should talk to really gain more clarity on that one.
So next is Vandana. Do most organizations take finance important enough than just a support function?
Great question. To be fair, probably is a mixed bag. A lot of finance organizations feel that with technology, their roles will go away. And that's where I spoke about this natural progression wherein the finance has to be a business partner and has to partner with the business. I'm sure all the business functions are looking at finance to play that role. But it is about changing the mindset and ensuring that you up-level the game and partner with the business. So it is again a tone from the top. It is again the mindset change that is required for finance to really transform itself. Is it happening in all the companies? Maybe the answer is no, but it is happening in increasing number of companies that I am seeing at this point in time.
Yes, sir. We have a few questions in the text box. Does SAP hires CA, CPA, CMA, and how is the finance team going on at SAP?
So good question. Bear in mind, I am just 2 months old as far as SAP is concerned, but we do hire CAs, CPAs, CMAs, and all that stuff. That's not the criteria. As I said, the entry level criteria is you having basic understanding or good understanding of finance and accounts. I consider that as a given. What I look for is people who want to learn, people who are hungry, people who can adapt and who can multitask, and most importantly, people who have the urge to really understand the business and then contribute to the best possible extent. So in an interview, when someone tells me that XYZ is working as a business finance professional in a company, I just ask a very simple question. So what is the strategy of your company, and how, give me 2 or 3 examples wherein you have been able to make a difference. Depending on the answer, I get the answer to my question in terms of what's really happening there. So don't focus too much on the basic qualification. It is very much required, don't get me wrong, but this is the foundational layer. What is more important is the kind of exposure that you have, the kind of skill sets that you have acquired over a period of time in order to be successful.
We have a question from Vivek, though he raised his hand, but I guess his speaker was not working. So his question is it seen that most of the times operations or COO like to access the control of business finance? Operations like business finance guys reporting to them, and in many organizations, this role keeps on shifting between operations and finance. What is your view on that? Yeah, what is your view on that?
Great question. In fact, historically, and I'm sure most of you can relate to what I'm saying, finance was also accused of holding the data or keeping the data with themselves because of confidentiality, because of multiple reasons. I would say because also of the fear that if that data is shared outside finance, the importance of finance will go away. As I said, finance is actually a co-pilot in successfully navigating the business. Operations to today focuses on the operational excellence in terms of the way business is run. And finance focuses on the fiscal discipline, financial discipline, and the decision making in terms of the way finance is run. These two are two different functions. There are a lot of companies wherein things are mixed, but more or less 90% of the companies, there is a very clear charter in terms of what operations is going to do versus what finance is going to do. So don't be sensitive to the fact that operations is asking for more data. That is good. You should have your own set of data, insights, and analytics handy in order to drive the business. And believe me, if operations and finance come together and collectively drive the business, that's the right approach in terms of taking the business to the next level.
Are outsourcing jobs bad?
So I would say it is a natural evolution. I would not say right or wrong or good or bad, right? But it is a natural evolution. Let's take an example of the shared services center example that I have given. If you have companies who have expertise in running a particular process, whether it is P2P, O2I, R2R, etc., who can run that process better and who can run that process in a much optimal way from a cost perspective, I would say outsourcing is right. However, cost as an objective should not be the only objective while outsourcing. It should be also focused on quality, continuous improvement, and technological advancement. Shripal, I guess we are on the top of the hour. Maybe one last final question before we call it a day.
I think we can take 3 more questions, Rohit.
Okay.
3 questions.
Sure.
Yeah. To remain competent in my internal audit profession in a construction industry, what should I focus on?
So again, you have to first define what you want to do from a long-term perspective. Do you want to be the auditor throughout your life? If that is the case, you have to focus on other areas in audit that you can look at. But if you want to become a CFO of an organization or any other function or any other role that you want to do, then it is about moving out of your audit role and acquiring those skill sets. So there is no straight answer. The answer would depend on what you want to do. It should first start with what is your mission statement. And once you have your mission statement clear, the answers will be more clearer.
How SAP HANA and SAP Ariba offering can help SMEs, and are there any special offerings for them?
Very technical question. HANA and Ariba are two different offerings, but basically, let me talk about Ariba. Ariba is focusing on procurement, right? So it ensures that sourcing is completely automated. You are able to negotiate good contracts with the vendors. You can empanel your vendors. You can have contracts with them, and you can also have contract compliance in place. Right, so Ariba focuses on procurement. Similarly, SAP Concur focuses on travel and entertainment from an expense line standpoint. How do we ensure that we optimize the entire process, bring in intelligence into the way the spends are done, gives enough visibility to the management in terms of where the spend is going on and whether that is really contributing to the top line of the company or not, and all that stuff. So depending on the technology, the benefits are there to be seen. You'll have to look into each and every technology in detail to really understand what are the benefits to any of the enterprises. But yes, these benefits can be seen not just by the large organizations, but also by SMBs as well.
What are the major changes regarding automation you see in international taxation field?
As I said, I am not an expert in taxation, so I would probably let a tax guru or a tax expert answer that. Again, which is a very important segue, right? As I said, what do you want to be, what do you want to do from a future standpoint? If you want to be a tax guru, obviously, I'm sure a tax guru will be able to answer your question. I'm not an expert in the tax area.
So Aishwarya, I will take up that one last two questions with Rohit. So Rohit, Nitya Paladagu have one question. Can you please share some of the major challenges which you faced in the beginning of your career? I remember working with BSA stock market when you were giving that farewell speech at Infosys. So I'm just able to.
So I will probably. So challenges are always there, right? So what are the challenges that a finance professional or any professional has? Am I working in the right company? Am I learning continuously? Am I being taken care of in terms of someone investing time in my career development? And to be honest with you, these are the, I would not say challenges, but these are some of the questions that every finance professional will have. And the answer lies somewhere down the line. You will have to respond by saying that, look, what do I want to do from a future perspective? What do I want to become? And if I want to become, let's say, a CFO of an organization, it is very important that you need to get skill sets from different variety of work that is there. So you will have to be patient. You'll have to learn each and every role in depth before you move to the next one. So challenges are in terms of getting the right opportunity. Challenges are in terms of getting the right kind of rotational opportunities in an organization wherein you move from A role to B role. Challenges are in terms of learning newer things when you are 24/7 you're doing your existing job. But the answer lies in what you want to do. The answer lies in what you want to become. What's your vision statement? If your vision statement is clear, I'm sure you'll find answers to your questions.
So one last question from Anushka. What do you suggest is a good way to integrate technical skills before starting a job or learning it while on the job, since data analytics is super technical? This is when you are just starting your career as a CPA or so.
Yeah, I am a big fan of on-the-job learning. I am not a big fan of learning completely and then going to the corporate world. If you are a qualified CPA, as an example, just find a job for yourself. Don't worry about what that job is all about. Don't worry about the value chain where that job belongs. Just go and get an experience in terms of what corporate world is all about. Once you really go into the corporate world, you will really evolve in terms of having a very clear understanding in terms of what you like and what you don't like. I can give you my example. I was very clear from day one that I don't want to be a tax expert, or I don't want to be an auditor. I did not like it while I was doing my CA. But in my corporate world, I have done instances wherein I have been doing audit for an organization. I have been a tax person for some of my organizations, and that was probably 15 years back. In Bombay Stock Exchange, I was managing the taxation as far as Bombay Stock Exchange was concerned. So get those experiences, very important. But really, if your mission statement is to do something else, find what is that you want to do from a future perspective, and then go for education or a parallel learning to really enhance your skill sets. I hope I'm able to answer that question.
Yes, Rohit. So I think one last question, and that is from me only. So I think this will, and it was a fantastic session. So as always, to every speaker, I just ask their routine. So what is Rohit Bhagade's routine? When does he wake up? What does he do in that whole day? I know your kids, we were doing a chat like a couple of days back, and you said my son also does the recording of transactions. So what is a debit, what is a credit, how much he have spent in a day. So I know the bring up what is going on, but how does Rohit plans his day? So what does he do when he wakes up, and how does the routine looks like for Rohit?
So Shripal, I keep it simple, right? I think for me, what really works is I wake up very early. I wake up by about 4:45 in the morning, and I just feel that 4:45 to probably 7 o'clock is a me time, wherein I invest in myself. And I go for a walk, I go for a run, I have my phone with me, and I keep listening to either songs. I am a big Kishore Kumar fan, so I listen to Kishore Kumar songs. I just feel those songs are relevant even today. I also use that time to really listen to an interview which has happened in the last 24 hours. And nowadays, there are a lot of interviews happening on COVID-19, economic crisis, what it means to corporate, what it means to personal finance and all that stuff. I just probably listen to all of these to really figure out what's really happening. So that's number one. Number two is I make it a point to call at least one of my friends every day to just have a casual 10-15 minutes conversation. I think managing relationship in a digital world is very, very important. And I just feel that is something that all of us need to do in the overall scheme of things. I am a big sports fan. So every weekend, not now, I am adhering to all the lockdown norms, but I typically used to play cricket every Saturday, Sunday. I am a wicketkeeper batsman. And I used to also track Premier League football. So the only time that I would watch TV would be on a Saturday or a Sunday when there is a Premier League match happening. I am an Arsenal fan. It's been pretty painful of late to see Arsenal because they seem to be losing most of the matches. But I continue to be an ardent supporter of Arsenal Football Club. So that's what I do as well. Last thing, I also try and spend time with my kids. So my son wants to become a cricketer. Every year his priority changes. As of now, he wants to be a cricketer. So I make it a point to play with him. But I play very tough. I don't get out when he's bowling. I want him to really earn the wicket rather than just make him happy and lose my wicket. I also take my daughter for swimming and some sports and all that stuff. At the end of the day, I just feel sports is a way of life. For you to really have good attitude, you should all play sports, and that really teaches you the importance of victory, but more importantly, the importance of defeat and importance of working as a team in a very collaborative manner. So that's what I do. In addition to the complex world that we live in, I try to keep myself with a very simple lifestyle. Last but certainly not the least, I love to cook as well. And I have been doing that for the last 14 years now. For me, that's a huge stress buster. I can't say I am the best cook, but I cook pretty okay. But it is a huge stress buster because while cooking, you can think of a variety of things which are happening in your life. And that is also a me moment wherein you are by yourself and really thinking of what we should be doing next. So that's from my side.
Good. Poonam was not here. If she would have heard about the cooking skills, I think I would have been at the receiving end, Rohit. Thank you so much, Rohit. It was an amazing session, and I think everyone can vouch here, all the attendees. This was one of the terrific sessions which have happened at Samandar Education. Thank you so much for providing your time. It's early morning, and that also on a weekend where you have kids, where you spend your time and taking out for this. This means a lot for Samandar Education, and especially for all the students who are attending this. This is an amazing session for all of us. Thank you so much, Rohit. Aishwarya, you would like to end up with something?
Thank you so much, sir, for sparing your valuable time for us and enlightening us with your knowledge and answering everyone's queries. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you, guys. And one last parting statement from my side. It is very easy to be lost in this large world. To be honest with you, some of the questions that you guys asked, I could clearly relate to it, because at one point in time in my career also, those similar questions I also had. Have faith in yourself, do your best. As I said, it is very important for you to learn skill sets. Definitely technical education and certification is important, but on the job experience is the most important and the most rewarding one. So don't hang into one role for eternity. Keep evolving, keep progressing, keep learning, and have a mission statement in terms of what you want to do. Once you do that, I'm sure you all will succeed. Again, Shripal and team, thanks for having me here. It was wonderful providing my perspective. It was wonderful interacting with the with the panelists and with the people here. It was really, really awesome, and I wish you all the very best. Happy Sunday. Enjoy your Mother's Day, and wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rohit.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, sir.
Happy Mother's
Thank you.
Day, everyone.
Take care. Bye.